Hello? My fiancé said, double the wedding budget or it's off. I replied, okay, and ended it calmly. Then I invested the fund into my business. 6 months later it tripled, and her father called asking me to reconsider. I'm Ryan, 34M. My fiancée, Melissa, 31F. Together 3 years, engaged for 8 months. On paper, everything looked perfect. Nice apartment, stable careers, Pinterest-worthy wedding planning. In reality, the cracks had been showing for a while. I just kept smoothing them over because that's what you do when you think you're already committed. This happened on a Tuesday night at our kitchen table. No fight, no raised voices. Just her laptop open to a wedding spreadsheet and that familiar tight smile she used when she'd already decided something for both of us. She spun the screen toward me and said, "So I talked to my parents, and this just isn't realistic anymore." I asked what she meant. She sighed, like I was being slow on purpose. "Our budget. It's embarrassing. Do you know what my cousin spent on her wedding?" I reminded her, calmly, that we'd agreed on the number months ago. A number we could afford without debt. A number I'd already set aside in a separate account. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and said the sentence that changed everything. "Double the wedding budget, or it's off." No emotion, no discussion, just terms. I waited for her to smile, to say she was joking. She didn't. She continued, "I'm not walking down the aisle in something that looks cheap. People will remember this forever." That word, people. Not us. Not marriage. People. I asked, "So that's it?" She nodded. "I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. If you really believe in us, you'll figure it out." I realized then she wasn't negotiating. She was testing compliance. So I nodded back and said, "Okay." Her shoulders relaxed instantly. She smiled, already planning upgrades, already spending money that wasn't doubled yet. She thought, okay, meant agreement. What it actually meant was the end. The weirdest part was how normal the rest of the night felt, to her. Melissa started scrolling venues again like nothing had happened. She talked about florals, lighting, the kind of chairs that photograph well. I sat there nodding, listening, already somewhere else mentally. At one point she said, "I knew you'd come around," and reached for my hand. I let her take it, not because I agreed, but because I was already done explaining myself to someone who heard commitment as funding. Later that night, she sent a group message to our families about exciting updates to the wedding plans. I saw my name used as proof of unity. Ryan and I decided. We're so excited to elevate the day. I didn't correct her. The next morning, I went to work early. Not to escape her, but because my head was suddenly clear. The wedding fund had been sitting in a separate account for months. Money I'd saved carefully. Money meant to celebrate a partnership. Now it felt like leverage. Over lunch, I pulled up my business projections. I own a small logistics software company. Nothing flashy, but stable. I'd been holding off on scaling because I didn't want to overextend while planning a wedding. Looking at the numbers now, the decision felt obvious in a way it hadn't before. That evening, Melissa came home buzzing. "I talked to my dad," she said. "He agrees with me. A wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. You don't want to start a marriage cheap." I asked her, "What if I don't double it?" She looked at me like I'd asked something absurd. "Then we cancel." I already told you that. No hesitation. No sadness. Just consequences delivered like a business clause. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't bluffing, but neither was I. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just said, "Okay, again." This time, she frowned. Like she couldn't tell if she was winning or losing. Neither could I yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't doubling the wedding budget. I was redirecting my future. 2 days passed before I said anything concrete. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be absolutely certain I wasn't reacting emotionally. Melissa, on the other hand, was operating at full speed. Venue emails, dress appointments, a new Pinterest board titled The Real Vision. Every choice more expensive than the last. She kept saying things like, "This is what a real wedding looks like," and "I don't want people whispering." Every sentence included an invisible jury she was trying to impress. Thursday night, she cornered me on the couch with her laptop again. "So," she said, tapping the spreadsheet, "I need to know when you're moving the money." I asked, "Which money?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't do that. The wedding fund. We're already behind if we're going to upgrade the venue." I closed my book and looked at her. Calmly. No anger. No sarcasm. "I'm not doubling it." She blinked. Once. Then laughed like I'd made a bad joke. "Okay. When?" "I'm not," I repeated. Her smile dropped instantly. "Ryan, don't start this." "You gave me a condition," I said. "I thought about it. My answer is no. She leaned forward, voice sharp now. So you're choosing money over me? I shook my head. No. I'm choosing not to be threatened into spending. Her face hardened. I was very clear. Double the budget, or the wedding's off. There it was again. Clean. Transactional. Final. I nodded. Okay. This time, she didn't relax. She stared at me, trying to figure out what version of okay this was. You're saying okay to what? She asked. To it being off. The silence that followed wasn't explosive. It was stunned, like the air had been pulled out of the room. You can't be serious, she said. People have already booked flights. I know, I replied. I'll help notify them. She stood up abruptly. You're unbelievable. After everything I've put into this. I didn't correct her. I didn't remind her whose money it was. I didn't argue, because the truth had already landed. The wedding wasn't off because of money. It was off because she tried to hold it hostage and expected me to pay the ransom. Melissa didn't cry. That's what surprised me. She paced the apartment instead, phone glued to her hand, firing off messages like she was managing a crisis. I heard my name come up more than once. Not gently, not kindly. You're seriously doing this to me, she said finally, stopping in front of me. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? That question sealed it. I said, I'm not making you look like anything. She laughed, sharp and humorless. Oh, please. Everyone knows when a wedding gets canceled, it's because the guy freaked out. I shrugged. If that's the story you want to tell. She stared at me, incredulous. So you don't even care? I care, I said. Just not about the same things you do. That set her off. She accused me of being cheap, of wasting her time, of leading her on. She reminded me how much effort she'd put into planning, how much her parents had bragged about the wedding already, how humiliating this would be for her. Not once did she ask if I was okay. Not once did she ask why the ultimatum mattered so much to me. At some point she said, you'll never find someone better than me who's willing to marry you. I remember nodding, almost thoughtfully. Maybe, I said, but I'll definitely find someone who doesn't threaten me to get what she wants. She went quiet after that. The next morning, I moved my things into the spare room. Not dramatically, just practically. She watched me with that mix of disbelief and resentment, like she was waiting for me to panic and backtrack. Instead, I called the venue and canceled. Then the caterer. Then the photographer. Each cancellation felt less like loss and more like relief. That afternoon, I logged into the account holding the wedding fund. The number stared back at me. Months of discipline. A future I'd earmarked carefully. I didn't hesitate. I transferred every dollar into my business account. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. If I was going to build something, it wasn't going to be a performance for people who were never going to be satisfied anyway. The apartment changed after that. Not in a dramatic way. No slammed doors. No screaming matches. It went quiet instead. Tense. Like we were both waiting for the other to blink. Melissa stopped speaking to me unless it was necessary, but she made sure I could hear her phone calls. Her mom. Her friends. Her sister. Every conversation was staged just loudly enough to carry. I just don't recognize him anymore, she'd say. Men panic when things get real. I guess I loved him more than he loved me. I noticed how carefully the narrative was being built, and how absent I was from it. 3 days later, her parents came over unannounced. Her father shook my hand politely. Her mother barely looked at me. Melissa sat between them on the couch like she was 12 again, arms crossed, jaw set. Her dad cleared his throat. Ryan, we're confused. Melissa says you called off the wedding over money. I didn't rush to defend myself. I just said, she gave me an ultimatum. Melissa scoffed. I set standards. Her father frowned slightly. Standards are one thing. Ultimatums are another. She shot him a look. You're taking his side now? I explained calmly. No emotion, no spin. The agreed budget. The sudden demand. The threat to cancel if I didn't comply. Her mother interrupted. A wedding reflects a family's values. I nodded. Exactly. That was the moment Melissa realized this wasn't going to be the intervention she expected. Her father asked, so what are you planning to do now? I already did it, I said. I invested the wedding fund into my business. Melissa stood up. You what? I moved on, I replied. Her face flushed. That money was for us. No, I said quietly. It was for a marriage. Those aren't the same thing. No one spoke after that. They left shortly after, tension thick enough to taste. That night, Melissa packed a bag and went to stay with her parents. She texted before midnight. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. I didn't reply, because for the first time since we got engaged, my future felt like it actually belonged to me. Once Melissa was gone, things moved fast. Not emotionally, but practically. I changed the passwords on my accounts that night. Not out of paranoia, but because boundaries tend to matter most right after you set them. The apartment felt quieter without her commentary filling every room. I slept better than I had in months. Work became my focus, not as a distraction, more like a return. I poured everything into the business I'd been running on half attention for the past year. The money I'd transferred from the wedding fund wasn't reckless, it was calculated. Product upgrades, 2 new hires, a marketing push I'd been postponing because the wedding comes first. Turns out clarity is fuel. Melissa texted sporadically, mostly short messages designed to reopen conversation without apologizing. We need to talk like adults. You can't just walk away from an engagement. I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, she showed up unannounced to grab more things. She walked through the apartment like she was inspecting damage, opening cabinets, shaking her head. You really did this, she said. You chose your company over me. I corrected her gently. No, I chose myself over ultimatums. She scoffed. Good luck explaining that to people. I don't need to, I replied. That's when she said something revealing. Do you know how hard it's going to be for me to start over at my age? I looked at her and realized she wasn't mourning the relationship. She was mourning the timeline, the optics, the plan. You'll be fine, I said. And I meant it. She left without another word. A month passed, then 2. The business numbers started shifting, slowly at first, then noticeably. A contract closed, then another. The kind of growth that doesn't make noise at first, but doesn't stop once it starts. By month 4, I knew I'd made the right decision financially. By month 6, I knew I'd made the right decision in every other way too. That's when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen since the engagement party. Her father. And suddenly, the past came calling, very politely. Her father didn't sound angry when he called. That's what made it unsettling. Ryan, he said, careful, measured. I hope this isn't a bad time. It wasn't. I'd just wrapped a call with a new client and was staring at numbers that would have felt unreal 6 months ago. I told him that. He paused, then said, Melissa told us your business is doing very well. I could almost hear the calculation behind his words. It is, I replied. Another pause. Then, she's having a hard time. I didn't say anything. Silence has a way of inviting honesty if you let it sit long enough. She didn't expect you to actually walk away, he continued. She thought you'd cool off. I smiled to myself. I wasn't hot. He sighed. She made a mistake. She knows that now. That was new. He went on, gently. Engagements are stressful. People say things they don't mean. Some people, I said, mean exactly what they say. He cleared his throat. She misses you. And circumstances have changed. There it was. Not she's changed. Circumstances. He asked if we could meet for coffee. Just to talk. No pressure. I told him I appreciated the call and agreed to meet. Out of respect for him, not curiosity about her. When we sat down a few days later, he got straight to it. She didn't realize how serious you were about your boundaries, he said. And frankly, she didn't realize what you were capable of building. I looked at him. That shouldn't have been a surprise. He nodded slowly. You're right. Then he said the sentence I didn't expect. If you were willing to reconsider, we'd support you. Both of you. However you want the wedding to look. I almost laughed, not out loud, but internally. The irony was sharp. 6 months ago, I wasn't worth compromise. Now I was worth negotiation. I took a sip of my coffee and said, calmly, I didn't end the engagement because of the budget. He waited. I ended it because I was given an ultimatum instead of a conversation. He leaned back, understanding flickering across his face. And there's no fixing that. I shook my head. Some things break trust cleanly. Once. He didn't argue. He just nodded, slow and respectful. I had to ask, he said. I know, I replied. And for the first time, I realized the call wasn't about reconciliation. It was about regret, arriving late, dressed as reason. After the coffee with her father, something interesting happened. Nothing. No follow-up call. No dramatic message from Melissa. No sudden apology text carefully crafted to sound mature. Just silence. And for the first time, it felt intentional instead of tactical. A mutual friend filled in the gaps a week later. We ran into each other at a networking event, and after a couple of drinks, she leaned in and said, she didn't think you'd actually level up like this. That wording stuck with me. Level up. Like the relationship had been some kind of waiting room, and I'd accidentally exited through the wrong door. Apparently, Melissa had been telling people that the breakup was temporary, that we were on a break, that I just needed time to cool off. She'd kept the engagement ring in her jewelry box. Hadn't told some people the wedding was fully canceled, just postponed. She was still living in the version of the future where I came back. I wasn't angry about it. I was fascinated. Because while she was preserving optics, I was building something real. The business had crossed a threshold where I stopped checking numbers nervously and started planning deliberately. New partnerships, long-term contracts, the kind of growth that doesn't spike and crash. One night, out of curiosity more than emotion, I checked her social media. The posts were different now, less smug, more vague. Quotes about patience, about trusting the process, about what's meant to come back. I realized then she didn't miss me. She missed the version of her life that assumed I would always be there to absorb pressure, fund appearances, and stay predictable. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey Ryan, it's Melissa." No apology, no greeting beyond that. "I've been thinking a lot. Maybe we should talk." No expectations. I stared at the message for a while. Then I put my phone down and went back to work. Because some conversations only matter before you move on, not after you've outgrown them. I didn't respond to Melissa's text. Not immediately. Not later. Not ever. A week after that message, I heard through the same mutual friend that she was telling people I'd changed. That success had gone to my head. That I'd become cold, distant, unrecognizable. I didn't correct the story. There's a strange freedom in letting someone else narrate their version while you live yours. What I did notice, though, was how the tone around me had shifted. People who used to talk around me now talked to me. Clients treated me like a peer instead of a risk. Even my parents, who'd been politely worried when the engagement ended, stopped asking if I was okay and started asking what was next. That question, "What's next?" felt good. One night, I found the engagement ring while reorganizing a drawer. I'd forgotten it was there. It sat in its box, exactly where I'd left it months ago. I didn't feel anything dramatic. No sadness. No nostalgia. Just recognition. That ring represented a future that required me to be smaller than I was capable of being. I sold it the next day. Used the money to fund a final upgrade we'd been debating internally for weeks. It paid off within a month. Around the same time, Melissa's father called again. Shorter conversation this time. "She's struggling," he said. "And she keeps asking what you're doing now." I replied honestly, "I'm doing well." He paused, then said, "She thought the wedding was the foundation." "It wasn't," I said. "It was the test." We ended the call politely. No tension, no bitterness. That night, I realized something important. I hadn't won anything. I just refused to lose myself. And once you do that, people who benefited from your compliance tend to show up late, hoping the door still opens the same way it used to. It doesn't. The last time I heard Melissa's name was through someone else's mouth, not her own. "She says you never really loved her," a mutual acquaintance told me casually, like it was trivia. I didn't feel the urge to defend myself. That version of events served her better than the truth ever would. If I never loved her, then she didn't push too hard. She didn't overplay her hand. She didn't mistake control for commitment. Time did what arguments never could. My business stabilized into something sustainable and real. Not flashy success, just momentum that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. I moved apartments, got a new routine, met new people who didn't see me as a resource to be optimized. Every now and then, I thought back to that Tuesday night at the kitchen table. How calm it was. How clean the moment felt. One sentence, one nod, one quiet ending. People like to believe breakups are explosive or emotional. Mine wasn't. It was administrative. Finalized the moment the ultimatum landed. 6 months later, her father tried again, once more polite than hopeful. "She's dating," he said. "But she compares." I wished her well. I meant it. Some lessons only work once. You don't get to rerun them with better intentions and the same mindset. I didn't lose a fiancé. I didn't dodge a wedding. I stepped away from a future where love came with conditions, deadlines, and public optics. And I didn't do it angrily. I didn't do it dramatically. I just said okay and meant goodbye. Bye-bye.